Greetings, students. Let's enlarge this screen. Welcome to Chapter 3. This covers Chapter 3 in your book, the Sheva, odd vowels, and the Dagesh. Now, you might be asking yourself, what's the best way to approach these videos? Is it to, should I watch the video before or after? That's really up to you. This is my recommended approach, though. I think that before you watch the videos, you should skim the chapter. Read through it relatively quickly. Don't read it, to memorize every detail, but read through it once, go to the video, then read through the chapter again with a little more care, especially doing the exercises. I think that will be helpful in terms of solidifying things in your mind, and I try to keep these videos well under an hour. I'd really try to keep them under 30 minutes because really the goal is to kind of lift up elements of the chapter that I think require a bit of explanation or that are a little bit more challenging. And so that's at least my goal in doing it this way. And I think from my perspective, doing it like kind of sandwiching the lecture in between two readings of the chapter can be a helpful way of attacking the material. So let's go on to our objectives. Students will be able to identify the 4 rules of the Sheva. And then secondly, students will be able to understand how the Dagesh works in biblical Hebrew. I do want to say one thing. We will encounter both of these again in the future, where I will have to add a little bit more nuance than I'm going to today because we're really just at the beginning of Hebrew. So just keep in mind that maybe I should say we'll partially understand how the Dagesh and how the Sheva works. We're not going to encounter them in their entirety, but we're going to give you just enough that we can begin jumping into Hebrew. So that's sort of my perspective on it. Okay, I want to introduce you to the Sheva. The Sheva can be identified as 2 vertical dots right here, and right here. The first word here is kli. Kali, that's how you pronounce that. So it's a kaf, lamed, yod. I know we're all still sort of learning the aleph bet and also learning the vowels, right? Very important that you learn these vowels just as well as you know the consonants. So kali, kali. The second word here is Yisrael. Yisrael. So you may recognize that. That's the word for Israel. The second, and the Sheva is here under the seen, right? That's what this letter is seen. It makes the S sound as in snake. The dot is above the third little pillar in the letter. Now with this third word, shot, right? Notice this is also, these look similar except that the dot is over the right pillar, and that is the sheen sound. So, and the last word is pronounced as shot. Now you may have noticed that that in the case of the first word, I pronounced the Sheva, kali. In the second word, I did not pronounce it, Yisrael. And in the third word, I also did not pronounce the Sheva, shot. What on earth is going on here? Whoops, I didn't mean to taunt you with that little dance. This is what's going on. There are 2 types of Shevas. First is vocal, which means you say it. The second is silent, which means you don't say it. Very, very simple, right? But the challenge is, how do I tell the difference? So let's ask the wise one how we tell the difference. And 4 rules there are. We'll start with the first one. If there is, I'm going to read through these, provide a tiny bit of an explanation, and then we're going to look at some specific examples. Okay, so firstly, Sheva at the beginning, or at the beginning of the word that is underneath the first consonant is vocal, and it makes a short E sound. Let's look at an example we just saw. Kali. Kali. Notice this is the very first vowel. It's under the first consonant, right? The way in Hebrew we read is up, down, right? Kali. We have to sort of look up and down the word. Whereas in English, right, just look at the sentences here. We read linearly, right? We look at the consonant and then there's a vowel, but they line up in a linear manner, not in Hebrew. It's vertical and linear all at the same time, which is another reason why it's challenging to learn how to read Hebrew. It's very important, by the way, that you learn how to read fluidly. I didn't say fluently, I said fluidly, but that you learn how to pronounce and read these Hebrew words with a high level of fluidity. So back to the point, though, If the schwa is at the beginning of the word, that is to say underneath the first consonant, it is vocal. Kali, kali. All right, that's the first thing. We'll look at more examples. I'm just giving you little ones here. Secondly, if the schwa is at the end of a word, it is silent. Shot, shot. Schwa at the end of the word, it is silent. That's rule number 2. Sorry. There we go. Rule number 3. If the schwa is alone in the middle of a word, it is usually silent and at the end of a syllable. So there are 2 points here. 1, if the schwa is in the middle of a word, it is generally silent and it is also generally at the end of a syllable. Let's look at the example I have. Yisrael. Okay? Think about how that word, let me actually write this out in English, part of it. I think it might help a little bit. Whoops. Am I in Hebrew mode? Yeah, let's switch to English keyboard. Okay, let's think about the word. Come on, help me out here. Let's think about the word Israel, right? Okay, how would we break this into syllables? Yisrael, Israel, Israel. Okay, so the consonant break comes in English in the same place that it comes in Hebrew, yis, right? And so the schwa here is in the middle of a word, which already tells us is probably silent, and then the added bonus is that that the schwa in the middle of the word generally ends a syllable. So in terms of recognizing whether a word is vocal or silent, if it's in the middle of the word, you can it is often going to be silent. Okay, I'm going to introduce a little qualification here in just a minute. But if you see a single schwa in the middle of a word, assume it is silent. Okay, so a schwa alone, that's the alone part, and that's going to be important. If you see a schwa alone in the middle of a word, it is usually silent, and it marks the end of a syllable, as in the word Yisrael. Now, here comes the exception, or here comes a tiny qualification. 2 schwas next to one another. The first is silent and the second is vocal. Now you see the reason why I put the word alone here, right? So if you have 2 schwas immediately next to one another, the first is silent, the second is vocal. Let's look at some examples of that. So, here would be one example of right here, of 2 schwas next to one another. Yishmeru, yishmeru. So the first schwa is silent, the second is vocal. Yishmeru, yishmeru. Back to the rules. When 2 schwas are next to one another, the first is silent and the second is vocal. So now let's do a couple exercises. We'll go back to this page and do some exercises. And the goal here is I'm going to read this aloud, give you a second, and then I will tell you the answer. Is it vocal? You try and do it, in real time. I'll give you a couple seconds to try and guess it, and then I'll tell you the answer. So the key question is the schwa, right? Each of these words has a schwa or multiple schwas. Is the schwa vocal or silent? What about the first word? Kali, 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 vocal or silent? The answer is vocal, right? And you can hear that in my pronunciation as well. Kali, kali. Next word, Yisrael, Yisrael. Is the schwa here vocal or silent? It's silent. Yisrael. And it also, so schwas, a single schwa in the middle of a word is generally silent. It also marks the end of a syllable. Yisrael, Yisrael. So that's the end of the syllable as well. This would be a syllable break. Third word, ot. 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 Is the schwa vocal or silent? It's silent, right? Because it comes at the end. Schwa at the end of a word equals silent. Sorry, I forgot to switch back and forth between these, the screen and the rules. I'll do that from now on. Mincha. Mincha. This is actually a great word for helping you to recognize the differences between the chet and the hey, right? These two are so similar to one another in how they look. But you'll notice that the difference between chet, which makes that hard CH sound, like if you've learned German before, you'll recognize it from words like ach, right? The hard CH sound of German is in the phrase ach so, or something like that. So mincha, and then the hey has this big gap, right? Now, what do you think? Vocal or silent shva? Mincha. Mincha. Vocal or silent shva? It is silent. And why? It is a shva alone in the middle of a word. It is usually silent, and it also marks the end of a syllable, right? So we could split the syllables here into min and cha right here between these two with the shva as the indicator. All right, let's look at the next word. Yishmeru. Yishmeru. So, here we have two shvas immediately next to one another, so we know there's a special rule that governs words that have two shvas when the two shvas are next to one another. So what is it? Which one's vocal, which one's silent? Well, yeah, and that is sort of the rule, right? You can't, at least in the world of Hebrew grammar, two people can't be talking at the same time. Two shvas can't be vocal at the same time when they're next to one another. So the first is silent, the second is vocal, right? Back to our rules. Two shvas next to one another, the first equals silent, the second is vocal. Yishmeru. Yish, silent, meru, vocal. Okay, yishmeru. Next, yifkod. Yifkod. So, is the shva here underneath the pei, is it vocal or silent? It is silent, right? Because the shva is alone in the middle of a word. Okay, and it also happens to mark the syllable, the closure of a syllable. Yifkod. All right, and then finally, lach. Is the shva here, found in the final chaf, vocal or silent? It is silent, and why? Because it is at the end of a word, right? The shva is at the end of the word. Those are the rules that you need to know and need to be able to apply for your quiz. So make sure for the quiz that you are able to look at words, for instance, words like this, and be able to tell me whether the shva is vocal or silent, or if one or the other, and also be able to transliterate these, which is to say, when we talk about transliteration, that's a way of saying, let me give you an example here. This is what transliteration, it is writing out in our Roman alphabet the sounds of a word. So let's think about the first one. Kli. Kli, how would you transliterate that? Something like this. Kli. Right? You can usually a word can be transliterated in a variety of different ways. So you could do something like, like for the next one, Yisrael. Yisrael. Right? Or some people, if they want to mark the aleph, you could do Yisrael. Either one. The point is, if I ask you to transliterate something on a quiz, it means I'm telling you to show me how the word is read or pronounced, but you'll just be using the Roman alphabet as opposed to the Hebrew one. So that's what the word transliterate means. That's what it means to do. To take a word that uses a different script and put it into the script, right? Like in our Roman alphabet with which we are most familiar. So be prepared to be able to do that, to be able to identify vocal and silent shva, and to be able to transliterate that word. Okay. All right. Now let's go to the Dagesh. All right. Let's go to the Dagesh. Here we go. The Dagesh is a dot that is found in the middle of most letters. So here we give an example. Kaf, Tav, Dalet, Beit. It's this little dot right in the middle. You'll learn in Hebrew that the dots matter, right? That these little details matter, which is why, you hear Jesus talking about jots and tittles. He's talking about these small little bits of the Hebrew letters that might be easily overlooked, but which are of great significance. So that's what the Dagesh is. Some of these letters are pronounced, some letters, Hebrew letters, are pronounced differently with the Dagesh. So for instance, this is pei, kaf, and beit. If there is a Dagesh in the middle of these, then they will be pronounced differently. They'll tend to have a harder sound. So for example, if you see a beit right here with a Dagesh, it is b, as in the word bat. If you see a beit with no Dagesh, as here, it is v, as in volume, as in the word volume. Okay, with the kaf, if you see a Dagesh in the kaf, it is the hard K sound, as in the word kite, or kitchen. If you see it without, then it is the word ch, the hard ch, as in the word Bach, like the musician or the composer Bach. With pei, if there is no Dagesh in pei, then it makes an f sound or a ph sound, so f, as in farm. If you see the pei with the Dagesh, it makes a hard p sound, as in pilot, as in the word pilot. Third, at the beginning of a word, the beged kefet letters usually take a Dagesh. So the beged kefet is just an acronym. And when these letters are found at the beginning of a word, it will typically have a Dagesh. So that will change the pronunciation for some of these, right? Especially beit, kaf, pei, beit, kaf, and pei. 5 letters, known as the guttural letters, cannot take a Dagesh, so you won't see a Dagesh in these. So those are sort of the rules of the Dagesh. You need to know those rules. So we're going to do a little bit of practice, okay? Especially with the words or the letters whose pronunciation changes based on whether it's a Dagesh or not. So let's look at this first word. How would you pronounce it? I'll let you sort of do it on your own, and then I'll give you the answer. How would you pronounce that? Bot. I'm using kind of English words here written in Hebrew just to make it a little bit easier, just in the same way that our book does this. So bot. This would be, bot in terms of I bought something, or also, sort of like a bot in the cybersecurity sense of the word, B-O-T. We pronounce those in English in the same way. But the point here is that the beit has a Dagesh in it, so it is bot as opposed to vat. All right. Whoops. Sorry, we had a bit of a dog emergency we had to deal with. Let me get back to our screen. So, if I can recall where I was, so this is the word bot, and it's because it has the Dagesh, it makes that hard beit B sound. So here's the second word. Park is how you would pronounce this. Park, as in the word, like a day at the park or something like that. But because the Dagesh is inside the pei right here, then it makes that hard P sound. So this would be the word park. Here is an example of the pei without the Dagesh, right? And so you would pronounce this as fantasy, right? Fantasy, or simply the word fantasy. And the only difference here is, again, the Dagesh in this space makes it a hard P, and in this case, because it's missing, it makes the PH or the F sound. Vet. Okay, so that's how you pronounce this word, vet. So this is the beit without the Dagesh, so in contrast to the word up here. Vet, so you could think of veterinarian or veteran, but this is the word vet. It makes that V sound when the beit does not have the Dagesh. So you may notice that, excuse me, that the beit without the Dagesh, you may have recognized that it makes the same sound as the Vav, right? So that can be potentially a little bit confusing in pronunciation. They do make the same sound, so no big deal. You just need to recognize that you do have, that letter does make the same sound without the Dagesh. Beit without Dagesh makes the same sound as Vav, no problem. Cot. This is the next word here, kat. So we have the kaf here with the dagesh inside, which means that it makes the hard K sound. And then we have, of course, the patach underneath the A vowel. And so cot, as in the word cot, like a sleeping cot, something like that. Hard K. Without the dagesh inside, it makes the CH sound, as is in the word bach. We practiced that earlier. So those are some examples. The Dagesh will be back a little bit later to teach us some more things. But for now, it's important just that you work on these rules for the Dagesh, that you're able to recognize the way it changes pronunciation and where it appears in a sentence, and also know which letters cannot take the Dagesh. And then also focus especially on the 4 rules of the Sheva. This will help you incredibly. It's really important that you will be able to both recognize and apply these rules while you're reading Hebrew, and that you can properly apply them during your reading. So, all right, everyone. Thank you. That's been chapter 3, dealing with the Sheva, odd vowels, and the Dagesh. I will look forward to seeing you in the next chapter. Thanks.